Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Learning Kitchen Live. My name is Carolyn Boyd and I am one of the registered dietitian nutritionists here at Community Servings. Thanks for joining us today. As always, I want to start off by thanking our friends at Boston Scientific for their support of this program. If you are new to tuning in with us, I wanted to let you know that we always put the recipe as well as a nutrition education handout in the comment section of this video. So if you like what you see or you want to learn more, feel free to check that out later today. All right, so we are going to jump right in. Today we are going to be making Chana Masala. This is an Indian-based dish that features chickpeas and a blend of spices. It's a very quick and simple recipe to put together with a few ingredients, which is why I really like it. So we are going to jump right in. To start, we're going to prep some of the vegetable options. I actually already have prepped ahead of time the onion. So this is just one medium yellow onion that we chopped. And then some garlic and some ginger that was minced. So these are on the side ready to go. The other ingredient that this calls for is a jalapeno that has been stemmed and de-seeded. Sometimes you might see this in a recipe and wonder, what does that mean? So I wanted to show you exactly what they mean when they talk about stemming and de-seeding a pepper or a jalapeno. So this is a pepper right here, or a jalapeno pepper, and this will add some heat to the recipe. Depending on your level of spice preference, you could just use this whole thing. You could chop it right up with all the seeds and pop it into the dish, but it would be pretty spicy. A lot of that heat comes from those seeds and the ribs on the inside of the jalapeno pepper, and that's what we're going to remove just to take away some of the heat from this recipe. So to do this, you just take your jalapeno, and you can slice off the top portion. We won't use this. What I like to do is slice it again down the middle. So you have your two halves here, and you can see this kind of white fleshy part in the center, and then some of the seeds. The seeds are the seeds, and then the white part is the ribs. So there's a couple ways that you can do this. Honestly, you can just kind of pull it out. That's what I tend to do with my fingers. Word to the wise, if you do this with your fingers, don't touch your eyes after because they will sting. My sister-in-law always talks about how she has to wear gloves, which isn't a bad idea because one time she did this and she changed her contacts and they were burning in her eyes. So again, if you're doing this, wash your hands really well after, or maybe even wear some of those like latex gloves. All right. So if there is a little bit more, you can kind of see here some of that, like the ribbing in there. You can actually just take your knife and chop away at it or cut away at it. And again, you're just going to push that all to the side. So this outer shell that we're leaving, it's still going to add some heat to the recipe, so it's still going to add a little bit of spice and flavor, but not nearly as much as if you used all those insides. So what I'm going to do is, it says to mince it in the recipe. What that really just means is to chop it pretty finely. So I'm going to run my knife through this, try to chop this as much as possible. And then we're going to go ahead and start our cooking process. All right. So again, depending on the level of the heat that you like in a recipe, you could certainly omit a jalapeno. You don't have to use one in the recipe. Or if you wanted, you could actually use half of one. If you have a really big pepper, you might not need all of that flavor. Ours was a pretty big pepper, but I also like spice, so I'm going to add the whole thing in today. All right, awesome. So for the most part, this is all chopped up. You can see it's just basically chopped pretty finely. So what we're going to do next, now that our veggies are all prepped, we're actually going to start the cooking process. And to do that, we are going to put our pan over about medium to high heat. I would suggest for this recipe, if you're making it as is, you use a big pot like this. If you use a smaller saucepan, it's probably going to boil over the top and you won't have enough space. So you're going to add about 2 tablespoons of olive oil or oil. And we're going to let that heat up a little bit. All right. Make sure it just coats the bottom of the pan. And then what we're going to add are our onions and our jalapenos. So we're just going to dump the onions right in. And the jalapenos. So you're going to let this cook for about 5 minutes. You want these veggies, so the onions and the peppers, to become softer and translucent. What that means in a recipe when it says wait until the onions or the garlic are translucent, basically means till they're tender, cooked down, and a little bit clear or opaque in color. So we'll see what that looks like in a little bit. All right, so we're gonna let these heat up. We're just gonna get them a little bit softer. And while we do that, we are going to talk about the main protein source in this recipe, which are chickpeas. So chickpeas are a plant-based protein, and as it kind of said in the description for this video today, plant-based proteins are great for our health and for the environment. So eating more plant-based meals, even just swapping it in once a week, is a really great way to help the environment and also to support your health. Today we are using, you can see here, canned chickpeas. So you can just find these at the grocery store. If you are at the grocery store, I suggest looking for the low sodium option. At my grocery store, they didn't have any low sodium options. So I'm hoping that means a lot of people are out there purchasing them. So today we just have the regular ones. What I did ahead of time was I actually opened the chickpeas, put them into a colander or a strainer, and rinsed them under water. Depending on how long you rinse it for, you can actually remove up to 30% of the sodium, which is pretty cool. So the longer you rinse them or let them soak in water, the more salt or sodium will be removed. All right, just keep stirring this. Keep an eye on your veggies as they're cooking, just again, so that they don't burn or stick to the bottom of the pan. So why are chickpeas really great for us? Why am I talking about them today? As I said, they're a great source of plant-based protein, and they also have a good amount of fiber in them. Because of their higher fiber and protein content, they are considered a lower glycemic food. What does that mean? Really, all this means is that when you eat them, after you eat them and are digesting, your blood sugars rise slowly and steadily over time. So this is really important and good for you to stabilize your energy levels. And if you are managing diabetes, this is really important as your blood sugar will creep up over time versus shooting up and then spiking down. So again, a really great source of protein and fiber. A half a cup, just for your reference if you're curious, a half a cup has 7 grams of protein and 6 grams of fiber. Plus all the extra veggies in here and then the whole grain we're going to pair it with, it's definitely going to be a high fiber meal. All right, so these are still cooking up. At the grocery store, there are kind of a few different options for chickpeas that you might see. Like I said, today we're using canned chickpeas. These are great. They're already cooked. All you have to do is drain that excess liquid, and they're pretty much ready to go. You can use them in cooking, recipes, or you could just eat them as is after draining them and rinsing them off. The other option for chickpeas that you may see at the store are in a bag like this. These are dried chickpeas or dried garbanzo beans. These are not cooked, so you would not be able to use these. If you tried to bite into one of these, they are very hard and pretty much rock hard. Probably break your tooth. So what you have to do is cook them. There are a few different methods for cooking dried chickpeas. We use a lot of these in my house, so what I like to do versus getting cans is I make a big batch of these ahead of time, pop them into individual bags, and then put them in the freezer so that I can take them out for later use. You can cook chickpeas, if you look it up online, on the stove. I've seen it in the oven. You can use an Instant Pot. My favorite method is actually to use a crock pot or a slow cooker. So what I do is I take this 1 pound bag, I pop it right into my crock pot with about 6 cups of water, pop the lid on it, and put it on low, and let that cook for 8 hours. At the end of those 8 hours, I just drain any of that extra liquid that's there, and then I put them into the bags, and right in the freezer they go. They're cooked, so that way when I need them, I can just grab them out of the freezer, let them defrost a little, run them under water, and they're pretty much all set and ready to be used. So that's a little trick if you want to start using some of the dried ones or you aren't sure how to cook them. That's a great method. All right, awesome. So these vegetables are starting to get tender, a little bit more translucent. If you can see it in the video, they are a little bit kind of clearer or opaque in color. So at this point, we're going to start adding some of the other food items. What we're going to go ahead and do is add our garlic and ginger. We're going to give that a stir. This is a very flavorful dish, which I love. You don't have to let this cook that long, maybe about 30 seconds or so, just until it's all blended with the onions and the peppers. All right, and then what we're going to do is add our spice blend. So today we're using coriander, cumin, garam masala, and turmeric. These are ground spices, so you're just going to dump these right in. And then again, give it a little bit of a stir. So authentic Chana masala actually uses whole spices. We're cutting a few steps to save some time and money by using the ground ones. So you're just going to continue to mix until everything gets incorporated and coated. Now, some of these spices that I mentioned, you might be thinking, I don't have these in my pantry, or I've never really seen those before. They would be an investment. You could buy them and then keep them in your pantry. The good news is ground spices can last for up to at least a year in your pantry. And what I like about these spices is that you can use them in other dishes. So it's not just for this dish, you can use them in other recipes. You can use them to flavor protein like chicken, fish, other beans. You can use them in veggies or even rice dishes. All right, so what I'm gonna add now that these are all incorporated, I'm gonna lower the heat a little bit. I'm going to add my whole peeled tomatoes. So this is just a jar of whole peeled tomatoes. And we're gonna dump that in. So as this is cooking, you're gonna wanna stir these all up. Because these are whole tomatoes, you're gonna wanna use your spoon and just start to break them apart. That way the juices from the inside are released and they kind of get into smaller pieces. So as we do that, I wanna talk a little bit more about the tomatoes. So again, when it comes to canned products, a lot of times there are lower sodium varieties out there. So a lot of times you'll see lower sodium or no added salt versions of canned tomatoes, diced tomatoes. The whole peeled tomatoes, I find it a little bit more challenging to find low sodium or no sodium versions. My grocery store didn't have them. So what I'm doing today is just using the regular ones. This dish doesn't have a lot of sodium in it in general. All of this would be split between 4 servings, so there's not too much, and we're not adding any additional salt to this meal, so we're not using like adding table salt or anything like that. So if you can't find a lower sodium version of the whole tomatoes, that's perfectly fine. You can just go ahead and use the regular ones. All right. So again, it takes a little bit of work to kind of break up these tomatoes, but you're gonna go ahead and do that while it continues to simmer. All right, the last step is that we are going to add the chickpeas. All right, so we have our canned chickpeas here. Again, I just rinsed them earlier and drained them from the cans. You're just gonna add that right into the pot and continue to stir. So this dish now is pretty much ready to be eaten. It's ready to go. However, the longer that you let it cook, the more the flavors will develop. So if you do have some extra time, you're not pressed for time, you can let this simmer for another 10, 15 minutes or so, and it'll really let those flavors absorb. You'll get really flavorful dish. But if you are pressed for time, you can serve it up right now. We're gonna let this just simmer a little bit more so these flavors develop, and I'm gonna tell you how you can serve this. Today we are going to be serving this with a whole grain. I actually cooked ahead of time a pot of farro. Farro is a whole grain. You may have seen it at the grocery store, but you can use any grain that you have on hand. Brown rice, quinoa, barley, anything that you have in your pantry, it really doesn't matter. So again, today we're serving this with a whole grain to make a really delicious, satisfying meal. This, as the recipe is written, would serve 4 people. So this is great, quick meal on a weeknight for your family. Or you could use this as a meal prep recipe. You could make this ahead of time, put it into little containers, and have throughout the week. I really like to actually eat this cold as leftovers. So everyone's a little bit different if they like hot or cold foods, but I find it's really tasty cold. So what I'll do a lot of times is make a batch of this, use leftovers cold for the rest of the week. For dinners later on, I'll pair it with a whole grain, or even I'll put it over a bed of greens, like on top of a salad. All right, awesome. So in the interest of time, I'm just gonna plate this up so you can see what it looks like. But again, the longer that you let it cook, the more those flavors will develop and more those tomatoes will break apart in the dish. All right, so what we're gonna do, I have a bowl here. I'm just gonna put a little bit of the farro, so your grain here. And then we're gonna scoop some of the chana masala on top. All right, and that's what it looks like. There you have it. So this is a really great tasty dish. If you wanted to add some more vegetables, you could always roast up some broccoli, kale, cauliflower, really any veggies that you have on the side. You could toss it right in or pair them on like a side plate. But hopefully you try this recipe at home and you enjoy it. If you do try it out, let us know in the comments what you thought, if you made any changes or you do something differently. And as always, I want to thank you for joining us this week, and we hope to see you next week back on Learning Kitchen Live.